Hello there, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Whether you've had a long day, a busy evening, or you're simply looking for a gentle place to rest your thoughts, you've found the right space. This is a place where you can let go. A place where the world slows down, where worries fade into the background, and where your mind can wander through quiet wonders without any rush or pressure. Tonight, we're going on a journey together. We're going to explore something ancient and beautiful, something that has stood still for millions of years while everything around it changed. We're going to drift through the world of mountains, not in a hurried way, not with any need to remember every detail, but simply to let these truths wash over you like a cool breeze on a summer evening. Mountains are more than just rock and stone. They are storytellers. They hold secrets from the very beginning of time, and tonight they're going to share those secrets with us. So let's walk together through their world. Let's discover what makes them breathe, what makes them grow, and what makes them, even in their stillness, so alive. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts drift like clouds over a distant summit, and know that wherever this journey takes you, whether you hear every word or fall asleep halfway through, you're exactly where you need to be. Welcome to 100 Sleepy Facts About Mountains. Fact 1. Mountains are born from the deepest forces of the earth. They rise not because they want to touch the sky, but because the ground beneath them pushes and folds and lifts over millions of years. The crust of our planet is broken into pieces called plates, and when these plates collide, the rock between them has nowhere to go but up. It crumples like paper, slowly, powerfully, creating peaks that pierce the clouds. This process is so slow that you could watch a mountain for your entire life and never see it grow even a fingertip's width. Yet it is always happening, always moving, always becoming. Fact 2. The tallest mountain on Earth, measured from sea level, is Mount Everest. It stands at 29,032 feet, a height so great that airplanes fly lower than its summit. Climbers who reach the top stand in air so thin that every breath feels like work. The sky above them is darker than the sky we see from the ground, almost black because there is less atmosphere to scatter the sunlight. Everest's peak is a lonely place, beautiful and harsh, where the wind never stops and the cold never yields, yet people are drawn to it year after year, pulled by something deeper than adventure. Fact 3. Not all mountains are made from colliding plates. Some are born from fire. Volcanoes build mountains by erupting again and again, layering rock and ash until a peak forms. These mountains are younger, sharper, still smoking with the memory of their creation. Mount Fuji in Japan is one of these. Its perfect cone shape has inspired artists and poets for centuries. From a distance it looks peaceful, even gentle, covered in snow and reflected in still lakes. But beneath that calm surface, the earth remembers how to burn. Fact 4. Mountains create their own weather. When wind-carrying moisture hits a mountain, it is forced upward. As the air rises, it cools, and the moisture turns to rain or snow. This is why one side of a mountain can be lush and green, covered in forests and rivers, while the other side is dry and bare. The mountain acts as a wall, holding water on one side and casting a shadow of dryness on the other. This shadow is called a rain shadow, and it shapes entire ecosystems, deciding which plants can grow and which animals can survive. Fact 5. The Himalayas, the mountain range that holds Everest, are still growing. Every year they rise a few millimeters as the Indian plate continues to push into the Eurasian plate. This collision has been happening for 50 million years and it's not finished yet. The Himalayas are young in geological terms, still sharp and jagged, not yet worn smooth by time. They are mountains in their prime, full of energy, still reaching. In another 50 million years they may look completely different, softened by wind and water, but for now they are giants in the making. Fact 6. Mountains are home to snow leopards, creatures so rare and so quiet that they are called ghosts of the mountains. These cats live higher than almost any other predator, in places where the air is thin and the cold is fierce. Their fur is thick and pale, marked with dark rosettes that help them disappear into the rocky landscape. They move alone, silently, hunting blue sheep and marmots across slopes that would terrify most animals. Seeing a snow leopard in the wild is considered one of the greatest privileges in nature, a glimpse of something almost mythical. Fact 7. The oldest mountains on Earth are not the tallest. In fact, they are some of the smallest. The Appalachian Mountains in North America were once as tall as the Himalayas, but they have been standing for 480 million years. Wind and rain have smoothed their peaks, rivers have carved their valleys, and time has worn them down into gentle rolling hills. They are ancient and tired, but they still stand. There is a quiet dignity in their age, a reminder that even the mightiest things eventually soften. Fact 8. Mountains hold more than half of the world's fresh water. Snow and ice collect on their peaks, storing water through the winter and releasing it slowly as the weather warms. Rivers begin in the mountains, fed by melting snow and underground springs, and they carry that water down to valleys where millions of people depend on it. Without mountains, many of the rivers we rely on would run dry. They are the reservoirs of the planet, quiet and cold and endlessly giving. Fact 9. There are mountains beneath the ocean, taller than any mountain on land. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a chain of underwater mountains that runs down the centre of the Atlantic Ocean. It stretches for 10,000 miles, and some of its peaks rise 20,000 feet from the ocean floor. If you could drain the ocean, you would see a mountain range more dramatic than anything on the surface. These underwater mountains are constantly growing as volcanic activity pushes new rock up from below. They are the birthplace of the ocean floor, the place where the earth creates itself anew. Fact 10. People have lived in the mountains for thousands of years. High in the Andes, ancient civilizations built cities on slopes that seem impossible to reach. The Inca built Machu Picchu at 7,900 feet above sea level, carving terraces into the mountainside and constructing temples that aligned with the movement of the sun. They understood the mountains in a way that modern people are only beginning to rediscover. They knew how to read the weather, how to grow food in thin soil, and how to live in harmony with heights that would make most of us dizzy. Fact 11. Mountains change colour as the day moves. In the morning, they glow soft pink and gold as the sun rises behind them. At midday, they are stark and bright, every detail sharp and clear. In the evening, they turn purple and blue, shadows deepening in every fold and valley. And at night, they become silhouettes, dark shapes against a sky full of stars. Watching a mountain through a full day is like watching a painting change before your eyes, each moment revealing something new. Fact 12. The air at the top of a mountain holds only half the oxygen of the air at sea level. This is why climbers struggle to breathe, why their hearts pound and their legs feel heavy. The human body is not designed for such heights, yet people adapt. Sherpas, the people who live in the Himalayas, have bodies that are uniquely suited to high altitudes. Their blood carries oxygen more efficiently, their lungs work harder, and their hearts are stronger. They can walk up slopes that would leave most people gasping, carrying heavy loads as if the thin air doesn't bother them at all. Fact 13. Mountains are full of fossils. Rocks that now sit at the top of peaks were once at the bottom of the ancient oceans. You can find seashells embedded in stone thousands of feet above the sea, proof that the Earth's surface has shifted and risen over millions of years. These fossils tell stories of a world that no longer exists, of creatures that swam where mountains now stand. It's a strange and humbling thought that the highest places on Earth were once underwater, teeming with life we can only imagine. Fact 14. Glaciers carve mountains like sculptors working in stone. As glaciers move, they grind against rock, carrying away anything in their path. They create valleys shaped like the letter U, wide and smooth, different from the narrow V-shaped valleys carved by rivers. Glaciers also leave behind lakes, filling depressions with crystal clear water that reflects the sky. Many of the most beautiful mountain landscapes were shaped by glaciers thousands of years ago during the last ice age. The ice is gone now, but its artwork remains. Fact 15. Some mountains are considered holy. In many cultures, mountains are seen as places where the earth meets the heavens, where prayers are heard more clearly and the divine feels closer. Mount Kailash in Tibet is sacred to 4 different religions. Pilgrims walk around its base, a journey that takes days, believing that the act will cleanse their souls. They do not try to climb it. To stand on its summit would be to dishonor something greater than themselves. The mountain remains untouched, a place of reverence and mystery. Fact 16. Trees cannot grow above a certain height on mountains. This invisible line is called the tree line, and it marks the point where the air is too cold and the winds are too strong for trees to survive. Above the tree line, the landscape changes. Grass gives way to rock, green turns to grey, and the world feels emptier, harsher, more exposed. Yet even here, life finds a way. Small plants cling to cracks in the stone, insects hide beneath rocks, and birds nest in sheltered spots. Life is stubborn, even in the most unforgiving places. Fact 17. Mountains create shadows that can be thousands of feet long. When the sun is low, a mountain casts its shadow across valleys and plains, darkening everything in its path. In some places, this shadow is so large that entire towns fall into darkness, while the surrounding land is still bright. People who live in the shadow of a mountain know these moments well. They mark the rhythm of the day, a reminder that something vast and ancient looms over their lives, quiet and unchanging. Fact 18. The sound of mountains is silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but a deeper silence, the kind that fills your ears and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. In the mountains, there are no car engines, no voices, no hum of electricity. There is wind sometimes, and the distant call of a bird, but mostly there is stillness. This silence can be unsettling at first, but if you let it, it becomes comforting. It reminds you that the world can be quiet, that not every moment needs to be filled with noise. Fact 19. Mountain rivers are cold. They are fed by melting snow and ice, and the water is so cold it can numb your hands in seconds. But this coldness is also purity. Mountain water is some of the cleanest water on Earth, filtered through rock and untouched by pollution. People who live near mountains know the taste of this water. It's sharp and clear, nothing like the water that comes from a tap. It tastes like stone and sky, like something ancient and untouched. Fact 20. Lightning loves mountains. Because they are tall and often isolated, mountains attract lightning strikes. During a storm, the peaks glow with electricity, and thunder echoes through the valleys like the earth itself is speaking. Climbers caught in a storm know the terror of this. The air hums, their hair stands on end, and metal equipment begins to buzz. The safest thing to do is crouch low, away from the summit, and wait for the storm to pass. Mountains do not care about human plans. They remind us, again and again, that we are small. Fact 21. The rock that makes up mountains is older than anything you can imagine. Some of it has been here since the Earth was young, since before there were oceans or life or even an atmosphere as we know it. When you touch a mountain, you are touching the bones of the planet, the foundation upon which everything else is built. This rock has seen the Earth change from a molten ball to a world of water and air and life. It has witnessed everything, and it remembers nothing. It simply is. Fact 22. Mountains are not permanent. They rise and then they fall. Wind wears them down grain by grain. Water carves through them, year after year, century after century. Ice splits them apart, freezing in cracks and expanding until the rock breaks. Gravity pulls pieces of them down in landslides and avalanches. Given enough time, every mountain will return to the earth, reduced to sand and carried away by rivers to the sea. But this process takes so long that to us, mountains feel eternal. They will outlive us, and our children, and countless generations to come. Fact 23. There are people who spend their entire lives studying mountains. Geologists climb their slopes with hammers and notebooks, chipping away samples of rock to understand how the earth moves. Ecologists catalogue the plants and animals that live at different heights, mapping the invisible boundaries that separate one ecosystem from another. Meteorologists set up weather stations on peaks to study the winds and storms that shape the climate. These scientists are drawn to mountains not just because of what they can learn, but because of how the mountains make them feel. Small, curious, alive. Fact 24. Some mountains are so remote that no human has ever stood on their summit. They rise in places where the weather is too harsh, the access too difficult, or the respect for the land too great. These unclimbed peaks remain mysteries, their heights estimated from photographs and satellite data, but never confirmed by human presence. They stand as they have always stood, untouched and unknown, reminders that there are still places on Earth that belong entirely to themselves. Fact 25. Mountains teach patience. They cannot be rushed. A climber who tries to move too fast will run out of breath, will make mistakes, will put themselves in danger. The mountain demands slow, steady movement. One step, then another, then another. Rest when you need to. Drink water. Breathe deeply. The summit will still be there tomorrow. This lesson applies to more than just climbing. Mountains teach us that some things cannot be hurried, that the slow path is often the only path, and that reaching the top matters less than how you got there. Fact 26. Mountains breathe in way we cannot see. During the day, the sun warms the slopes and the air rises, creating winds that flow upward like invisible rivers. At night, the air cools and sinks back down into the valleys, carrying the cold with it. This daily rhythm creates breezes that mountain dwellers know by heart. They can tell the time of day by the direction of the wind, by whether it carries warmth or chill. These winds shape the weather, scatter seeds, and carry the scent of pine and stone across great distances. The mountain is always breathing, always moving air from one place to another, a gentle reminder that even things that seem still are full of hidden motion. Fact 27. Snow on a mountain can stay frozen for thousands of years. High on the peaks, where the temperature never rises above freezing, snow falls and stays, layer upon layer, year after year. The weight of new snow presses down on the old, squeezing out the air and turning it into ice. This ice becomes glaciers, massive rivers of frozen water that move so slowly you cannot see them move at all. Scientists drill into this ice to study the past. Each layer holds tiny bubbles of ancient air, preserved like messages in bottles. By studying these bubbles, we can learn what the atmosphere was like hundreds or even thousands of years ago. The ice remembers everything. Fact 28. There are flowers that bloom only on mountains, flowers that have adapted to survive where most plants would die. The edelweiss grows in rocky crevices high in the Alps, its white fuzzy petals protecting it from the cold and the intense sunlight. Mountain avens bloom in the Arctic and on high peaks, their yellow flowers opening toward the sun to capture every bit of warmth. These plants are small and tough, their roots digging deep into thin soil, their stems bent low to avoid the wind. They bloom for only a few weeks each year, a brief explosion of colour in a landscape of grey and white. To see them is to witness determination, life refusing to surrender, even in the harshest conditions. Fact 29. Mountains can make their own clouds. When moist air flows up a slope and cools, the water vapour condenses into tiny droplets that hang in the air. These clouds cling to the mountainside, wrapping around the peaks like scarves, hiding the summit from view. Sometimes these clouds are so thick that climbers walk through them as if walking through fog, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. Other times, the clouds sit just below the peak, and climbers who reach the top find themselves standing above a sea of white, with only the highest summits poking through like islands. It is a strange and beautiful sight, as if the world below has disappeared and only the mountains remain. Fact 30. The sound of an avalanche is unforgettable. It begins with a crack, sharp and sudden, as a slab of snow breaks free from the slope. Then comes a roar, deep and growing, as thousands of tons of snow begin to tumble downward. The sound echoes off the surrounding peaks, amplified and distorted until it feels like the whole mountain is collapsing. Avalanches can travel over 100 miles per hour, faster than a car on a highway, and they carry everything in their path with them. Trees, rocks, ice, all swept up in a churning white wave. When the avalanche finally stops, silence returns, sudden and complete, as if the mountain is catching its breath after a moment of terrible violence. Fact 31. Some mountains glow at sunset in a phenomenon called alpenglow. Just after the sun dips below the horizon, the peaks light up in shades of pink, orange and red, glowing as if lit from within. This happens because the atmosphere scatters the sunlight, and the mountains, being so tall, catch the last rays long after the valleys have fallen into shadow. The glow lasts only a few minutes, fading as the light moves on, leaving the mountains dark and silent once more. People have watched this glow for centuries, and it never loses its magic. It feels like a gift, a brief moment when the mountains reveal a secret beauty before returning to their quiet vigil. Fact 32. Mountain goats are not actually goats. They are more closely related to antelopes, but they have been given this name because of where they live and how they move. These animals are masters of balance, able to climb nearly vertical cliffs with ease. Their hooves have hard outer edges and soft inner pads that grip the rock like climbing shoes. They can stand on ledges no wider than a coin, comfortable and calm, gazing out over drops that would make most creatures panic. They live their entire lives on steep slopes, where predators cannot follow, grazing on grasses and plants that grow in places nothing else can reach. To watch a mountain goat move is to see confidence made physical. Fact 33. Rain that falls on one side of a mountain may end up in a completely different ocean than rain that falls on the other side. Mountains act as divides, separating watersheds and determining where water will eventually flow. A drop of rain that lands on the western slope of the Rocky Mountains might flow into the Pacific Ocean, while a drop that lands just a few feet away on the eastern slope might travel all the way to the Atlantic. This invisible line is called a continental divide, and it shapes the geography of entire regions. Rivers, forests, cities, all are influenced by which side of the mountain they happen to be on. Fact 34. The Matterhorn, one of the most famous mountains in the world, was considered unclimbable for many years. Its sharp pyramid shape and smooth rock faces seemed impossible to scale. But in 1865, a team of climbers reached the summit for the first time. The victory was brief. On the way down, 4 members of the team fell to their deaths, their rope breaking during the descent. The tragedy shocked the world and sparked debates about whether humans should even attempt such dangerous feats. But it did not stop people from climbing. The Matterhorn has been climbed thousands of times since, and it remains a symbol of both human ambition and the mountain's indifference to our desires. Fact 35. Mountains are home to creatures that seem impossible. The Himalayan jumping spider lives at 22,000 feet, higher than any other spider on Earth. It survives by eating insects that are blown up the mountain by the wind, frozen and helpless. The spider waits among the rocks, patient and still, feeding on whatever the wind delivers. There is no vegetation at this height, no shelter, nothing but stone and ice and thin air. Yet the spider thrives, a tiny spot of life in a place that feels more like another planet than part of our own Earth. It reminds us that life is more adaptable than we ever imagine. Fact 36. Mountains grow and shrink with the seasons. The weight of winter snow presses them down, and in the spring, when the snow melts, they rise back up. This movement is tiny, only a few millimeters, but it can be measured with sensitive instruments. The earth beneath the mountains is not solid like we think. It bends and flexes under weight, responding to the push and pull of ice and snow. This discovery changed the way scientists understand the planet. The ground beneath our feet is not as stable as it seems. It moves and breathes and shifts in response to forces we rarely notice. Fact 37. There are lakes on mountains that have no outlet. Water flows in from rain and melting snow, but it never flows out. These lakes are called endorheic, and they can only lose water through evaporation. Over time, minerals and salts build up in the water, making it far saltier than the ocean. Some of these mountain lakes are so salty that nothing can live in them, except for a few specialized bacteria. The water is clear and still, reflecting the sky like a mirror, beautiful and lifeless. They are strange and haunting places, reminding us that not all water leads to the sea. Fact 38. The word mountain comes from an old Latin word that means to rise, or to project. It is a simple definition, but it captures something essential. Mountains rise, they project upward, they stand out from the flat earth around them, impossible to ignore. In almost every language, the words for mountain carry a sense of height and prominence. This is no accident. Mountains have always been landmarks, guiding travellers and shaping the way people navigate the world. Before maps and compasses, people used mountains to find their way. They still do. Fact 39. some mountains sing. When the wind blows across certain rock formations, it creates sounds that range from low hums to high whistles. The rocks act like musical instruments, vibrating at specific frequencies depending on their shape and size. In some places, these sounds are so eerie that they have inspired legends of spirits and hidden creatures. But the explanation is simple physics. Air moving through gaps and over surfaces creates pressure waves, and those waves become sound. The mountain is not singing on purpose, but the effect is the same. It fills the air with music that no human composed. Fact 40. Mountain climbers often see something called a Brocken spectre. This happens when a climber stands with the sun behind them and looks down into mist or clouds. Their shadow is cast onto the cloud, but because of the way light scatters, the shadow appears enormous and is surrounded by a glowing halo of light. The effect is startling, almost supernatural. For centuries, people who saw this phenomenon thought they were witnessing spirits or divine beings. Now we understand the science, but the experience is no less powerful. To see your own shadow magnified and haloed in light is to feel for a moment larger than yourself. Fact 41. Mountains hold minerals that the world depends on. Deep inside their rock are veins of copper, gold, silver, and rare elements used in everything from phones to solar panels. Mining these minerals is difficult and dangerous work. Tunnels are carved into the mountainside, sometimes miles deep, and workers extract the ore piece by piece. The mountain gives up its treasures slowly, reluctantly. Some of the oldest mines in the world are in mountains, places where humans have been digging for thousands of years. The mountain has been generous, but it is not infinite. What took millions of years to form can be exhausted in a single human lifetime. Fact 42. There is a mountain range on the Moon. The Montes Apenninus rises nearly 3 miles above the surrounding plains, formed billions of years ago when asteroids and comets bombarded the lunar surface. These mountains have no wind to wear them down, no water to carve valleys, no plants to soften their slopes. They look today almost exactly as they did when they were formed, sharp, jagged, untouched by time. Astronauts from the Apollo missions saw these mountains up close, and they described them as beautiful and alien, a landscape frozen in its moment of creation. They are a reminder that mountains exist not just on Earth, but throughout the universe. Fact 43. The people who live in mountains often live longer than people who live at sea level. Scientists are not entirely sure why, but they have theories. The air is cleaner, with less pollution. The terrain is steep, so daily life requires more physical activity. The pace is slower, less stressful. The diet often includes fresh food grown locally. Whatever the reason, mountain communities around the world report high numbers of people living into their 90s and beyond. There is something in the mountain life that sustains not just the body, but the spirit. Perhaps it is the simplicity, or the beauty, or the feeling of being connected to something ancient and enduring. Fact 44. Mountains can collapse. It does not happen often, but when it does, the results are catastrophic. The entire side of a mountain can slide away in a massive landslide, burying valleys and changing the landscape forever. In 1980, Mount St. Helens in Washington erupted, and its entire north face collapsed, creating the largest landslide in recorded history. The debris travelled 14 miles and covered an area of 24 square miles. Where there had been a symmetrical peak, there was now a gaping crater. The mountain had torn itself apart and the land below was transformed. It is a reminder that even mountains, as solid as they seem, are not immune to sudden and violent change. Fact 45. The shadow of a mountain can affect the climate for hundreds of miles. The Andes Mountains in South America create a rain shadow so large that it has turned the western coast into one of the driest deserts on Earth. The Atacama Desert receives almost no rain, some areas going decades without a single drop. Yet just on the other side of the mountains, the land is lush and green, fed by moisture that the peaks capture and hold. The mountain decides who gets water and who does not, shaping entire ecosystems with its presence. It is a quiet form of power, the ability to alter the world simply by standing in the way. Fact 46. There are caves inside mountains, hidden passages carved by water over millions of years. Some of these caves are small, barely large enough to crawl through. Others are vast, with chambers big enough to hold entire buildings. Explorers descend into these caves with ropes and lights, mapping passages that no one has ever seen. Inside, they find formations of stone that have grown drip by drip, stalactites hanging from the ceiling and stalagmites rising from the floor. The air is cool and still, and the silence is absolute. It feels like stepping into the mountain's secret heart, a place where time moves differently and the outside world ceases to exist. Fact 47. Mountains remember fire. In places where volcanic mountains have erupted, the rock is still black and glassy, frozen in the moment of its creation. This rock, called obsidian, is smooth and sharp, breaking into edges that can be finer than any metal blade. Ancient people used obsidian to make tools and weapons, valuing it for its sharpness and its beauty. Even now, some surgical scalpels are made from obsidian because the edge is so precise. The mountain gave them this gift, a material born from fire and cooled into something useful. The rock is a memory, a reminder that the mountain was once molten and alive with heat. Fact 48. Some mountains have never been measured accurately. They are so remote, so difficult to reach, that no one has stood at their base with the instruments needed to determine their exact height. Satellite data provides estimates, but mountains are complicated shapes, and measuring them requires more than just pointing a camera from space. Teams of surveyors must hike to the summit, set up equipment, and take readings from multiple locations. It is exhausting work that can take weeks or even months. Yet the desire to know the exact height persists, as if naming the number somehow makes the mountain more real, more knowable. But the mountain does not care about numbers. It simply is, measured or not. Fact 49. The forests that grow on the lower slopes of mountains are different from forests anywhere else. They are wetter, cooler, often shrouded in mist. Moss covers every surface, thick and green, muffling sound and holding moisture. Trees grow tall and straight, their branches draped with lichen that hangs like curtains. The air smells rich, like soil and rain and growing things. These forests are called cloud forests, and they are among the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. Thousands of species live here, many of them found nowhere else. The forest depends on the mountain to create the conditions it needs, and the mountain in turn is softened and enriched by the forest's presence. Fact 50. Standing at the top of a mountain changes you. Not because of the view, though the view is often breathtaking. Not because of the accomplishment, though reaching the summit can feel like a victory. It changes you because of what it represents. You stood at the bottom and looked up, and the distance seemed impossible. But you started walking, one step at a time, and eventually you arrived. The mountain taught you that impossible is just a word. That persistence matters more than strength. That the journey itself, with all its difficulty and doubt, is where the real growth happens. People carry this lesson with them long after they descend, applying it to challenges that have nothing to do with mountains. The peak is just a place. What matters is what you learned on the way up. Fact 51. Mountains are older than the dinosaurs. Some mountain ranges formed hundreds of millions of years ago, long before any creature walked on land. The Appalachian Mountains watched as the first fish crawled out of the ocean and learned to breathe air. They stood as forests spread across the continents, as giant insects filled the skies, and as the ancestors of all modern animals began to evolve. These ancient ranges have witnessed more history than we can comprehend. They have seen the planet transform from a place we would not recognize into the world we know today. Every rock in these mountains is a page in a book that tells the story of life itself, written in a language of stone and time. Fact 52. There are animals that change colour with the seasons in the mountains. The ptarmigan, a bird that lives in high alpine regions, has white feathers in winter to blend with the snow. When spring arrives and the snow begins to melt, the bird molts and grows brown feathers speckled with grey and tan, matching the exposed rocks and sparse vegetation. This transformation happens gradually, keeping the bird camouflaged at every stage. Predators scan the slopes looking for movement, looking for anything that stands out, but the ptarmigan disappears into its surroundings. It is a strategy for survival, a way of becoming invisible in a place where there is nowhere to hide. Fact 53. The wind on a mountain can be strong enough to knock a person off their feet. High on exposed ridges, gusts can exceed 100 miles per hour, turning the act of standing upright into a battle. Climbers lean into the wind, using their weight to stay grounded, and they time their movements between gusts. Objects left unsecured are torn away in an instant, sent tumbling down the slope or carried off into the air. The wind does not stop. It howls day and night, bending trees into twisted shapes, polishing rocks smooth, and carving patterns into the snow. It is the mountain's voice, louder than any other sound, speaking a language of force and persistence. Fact 54. Some mountains have lakes near their summits, small bodies of water perched impossibly high. These lakes are fed by melting snow and rain, and they are often crystal clear, so clear you can see straight to the bottom even if the water is deep. Fish cannot reach these lakes because there are no rivers connecting them to lower waters, so they remain empty of life, except for tiny organisms and perhaps a few insects. The stillness of these high lakes is profound. They reflect the sky perfectly, doubling the clouds and the surrounding peaks, creating a mirror image that feels almost unreal. To stand beside one is to feel like you have stepped into a photograph. Fact 55. Mountain people have their own ways of predicting weather. They watch the clouds, noting their shape and speed and the direction they come from. They listen to the wind and feel the moisture in the air. They observe the behavior of animals, knowing that birds fly lower before a storm and that certain insects become more active when the pressure drops. These methods are not superstition. They are the result of generations of observation, passed down from parent to child, refined through experience. Modern forecasts rely on satellites and computers, but in the mountains, where weather can change in minutes, the old ways still hold value. The people trust their senses and the patterns they have learned to recognize. Fact 56. There are plants in the mountains that take decades to grow just a few inches. The cushion plant, found in alpine zones around the world, forms tight, compact domes that look almost like moss-covered stones. These plants grow so slowly because the growing season is short, sometimes only a few weeks each year. The rest of the time, they are buried under snow, frozen and dormant. A cushion plant the size of your fist might be 50 years old. One the size of a pillow could be centuries old. They are among the longest living plants on Earth, patient beyond measure, surviving by doing almost nothing, simply enduring year after year in a place where haste would mean death. Fact 57. Moonlight on snow-covered mountains creates a brightness that feels like daylight. The snow reflects the moonlight so efficiently that you can walk without a flashlight, see the details of the landscape, and even read if the moon is full. This reflected light is soft and blue, gentler than sunlight but bright enough to cast shadows. Climbers sometimes take advantage of this, travelling at night when the snow is firm and the risk of avalanche is lower. The world becomes quiet and strange under the moon, the familiar peaks transformed into silver sculptures, and the only sounds are the crunch of boots on snow and the rhythm of breathing in the cold, thin air. Fact 58. Mountains can create their own ecosystems in the space of just a few miles. At the base you might find dense forests full of birds and deer. Climb higher, and the trees become shorter and more sparse, giving way to meadows filled with wildflowers. Higher still, the meadows fade into rocky slopes where only the toughest grasses survive. At the summit, there is nothing but bare rock and ice, a place where life cannot establish itself. This change happens not because you have travelled across the continent, but simply because you have gone up. Altitude compresses the climate zones that would normally stretch over thousands of miles, stacking them on top of each other like layers in a cake. Fact 59. There are mountains that rumble, not from eruptions or earthquakes, but from the movement of glaciers. As the ice slides over the bedrock beneath it, it grinds and scrapes, creating vibrations that travel through the mountain. Sometimes these vibrations are strong enough to be felt, a low thrumming that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. People who live near glaciers know this sound. It is the sound of the mountain digesting itself, slowly reshaping its own body. It is a reminder that mountains are not static objects but active landscapes, constantly in motion even when that motion is too slow for our eyes to see. Fact 60. The line where snow never melts, even in summer, is called the permanent snow line. This line varies depending on latitude and local climate. Near the equator, it might be 15,000 feet above sea level. Near the poles, it can be at sea level itself. Above this line, the world is locked in perpetual winter. Below it, life can take hold, at least for part of the year. This line is not fixed. It rises and falls with the climate, moving upward during warm periods and creeping downward when the Earth cools. Scientists monitor this line because it tells them how the planet is changing. A rising snow line is a signal that temperatures are increasing, that the balance is shifting. Fact 61. Marmots live in the mountains and spend most of their lives preparing for winter. These chubby rodents eat constantly during the summer, gaining weight until they are round and heavy. When autumn arrives, they retreat into their burrows, seal the entrance with grass and soil, and curl up together in family groups. Then they sleep. For 8 months or more they remain underground, their body temperature dropping, their heartbeats slowing to just a few beats per minute. They live, off the fat they stored, barely moving, barely breathing, suspended in a state between life and death. When spring finally comes and they emerge, they are thin and weak, but they are alive. They greet the sun, shake off the long sleep, and begin eating again. Fact 62. There are trails on mountains worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Pilgrims, traders, shepherds, and travellers have walked these paths for so long that the stone itself has been shaped by their passage. The trails wind around obstacles, follow the easiest grades, and lead to passes where crossing from one valley to another is possible. Some of these trails are still used today, their routes unchanged because the mountain offers no better alternative. To walk these paths is to walk in the footsteps of countless people who came before, all of them seeking something, whether it was trade, safety, or simply a way through. The mountain remembers every step. Fact 63. Mountains influence language. People who live in mountains have words for types of snow that lowlanders have never considered. They have words for specific winds, for the quality of light at different times of day, for the sound the rocks make when they are about to fall. These words exist because they are needed. In the mountains, being able to describe conditions precisely can mean the difference between safety and danger. Outsiders might think these distinctions are unnecessary, that snow is just snow. But to someone who lives with the mountain, each variation carries meaning. Language adapts to the environment, growing richer and more specific wherever precision matters. Fact 64. Some mountains are so steep that even rain has trouble reaching the ground. Droplets fall from the clouds but are caught by the wind and blown sideways, turning rain into mist before it can land. This horizontal rain soaks everything on the windward side of the mountain, drenching plants and filling cracks in the rock, while the other side remains dry. Climbers caught in this kind of rain find that their waterproof jackets are useless. The water comes from every direction, finding its way through zippers and seams, chilling them to the bone. The mountain does not care about human discomfort. It simply exists, indifferent to the struggles of those who try to cross it. Fact 65. The rock at the top of many mountains is different from the rock at the bottom. This happens because mountains are built from layers that have been pushed upward, folded, and sometimes turned upside down by the forces that created them. Geologists can read these layers like a history book, identifying which rocks are older and which are younger, tracing the sequence of events that built the mountain. Sometimes they find ancient ocean floor at the summit, limestone filled with fossils of creatures that lived in shallow seas. The mountain has carried this evidence upward, lifting the past into the present, making it visible for anyone willing to look closely. Fact 66. There are insects in the mountains that survive being frozen solid. The woolly bear caterpillar found in Arctic and alpine regions spends most of its life frozen. When winter comes, ice crystals form in its body, and it stops moving, stops eating, stops everything. In the spring, it thaws and continues as if nothing happened. It can survive this freezing and thawing cycle for up to 14 years before it finally becomes a moth. Most of that time is spent frozen, waiting. It is a life of patience, of enduring conditions that would kill almost any other creature. The caterpillar does not fight the cold. It accepts it, adapts to it, and survives. Fact 67. Mountains create borders between nations. Their height and difficulty make them natural boundaries, places where one country ends and another begins. Armies have struggled to cross mountains, and many wars have been decided by who controlled the mountain passes. Even today, borders often follow the ridgelines of mountain ranges, with border markers placed on remote summits that few people ever visit. These political lines are human inventions, but they follow the mountain's own logic. The mountain divides not because anyone asked it to, but simply because it is there, too large and too difficult to ignore. Fact 68. The silence after an avalanche is different from any other silence. It is heavier, more complete, as if the mountain itself is holding its breath. The snow that was moving and roaring just moments before has settled into stillness, and the air is filled with tiny ice crystals that catch the light and shimmer. Nothing moves, nothing makes a sound. This silence can last for minutes, and then, slowly, the normal sounds of the mountain return. A bird calls, the wind picks up, life continues. But for those who witnessed the avalanche, the silence remains in their memory, a reminder of how quickly the mountain can change from peaceful to violent and back again. Fact 69. There are hot springs in some mountains, places where water heated deep underground rises to the surface. These springs steam in the cold mountain air, creating pools of warm water surrounded by snow and ice. Animals come to these springs in winter, drawn by the warmth and the minerals in the water. People have used these springs for thousands of years, bathing in them, believing in their healing properties. The contrast is startling, to sit in warm water while snowflakes land on your head, to feel the heat rising from below while the cold presses in from all sides. It is a reminder that the mountain is not just cold rock, that beneath the surface, the earth is still warm. Fact 70. Mountain ranges often run in long chains, connected like the links of a necklace. The Andes run the entire length of South America, over 4,000 miles from north to south. The Himalayas stretch across Asia, forming a barrier between the Indian subcontinent and the Tibetan plateau. These chains were formed by the same geological processes, the collision of tectonic plates creating not just one mountain but hundreds, all linked together. From space, these ranges look like wrinkles in the Earth's skin, lines drawn across the continents. They are scars from ancient impacts, evidence of the forces that continue to shape the planet. Fact 71. There are birds that nest on the highest cliffs, in places that seem impossible to reach. The golden eagle builds its nest on narrow ledges thousands of feet above the ground, using sticks and branches carried from below. The nest can be used for years, growing larger each season as new material is added. From this high perch, the eagle can see for miles, spotting prey moving on the slopes below. The chicks grow up surrounded by Kong, with nothing but air between them and the valley floor. They learn to fly not by choice but by necessity. When they leave the nest for the first time, there is no safety net, no second chance. They must fly, or they will fall. Fact 72. Some mountains have caves where ice has been preserved for thousands of years. These ice caves are dark and cold, their walls covered in thick layers of ice that never melt. Scientists study the ice, drilling cores to extract samples that contain pollen, ash, and tiny particles trapped when the ice first formed. These samples tell stories about the climate, about volcanic eruptions, about forests that grew and died long before recorded history. The cave is like a freezer, preserving the past in perfect detail. Every layer is a moment frozen in time, waiting to be read. Fact 73. The weight of a mountain pushes down on the Earth's crust beneath it, creating a depression. This is called isostasy, the principle that the crust floats on the denser mantle below, rising and sinking to maintain balance. When a mountain forms, the crust beneath it sinks deeper. When a mountain erodes away, the crust rises back up. This process is so slow that it takes millions of years, but it is happening constantly. The earth beneath mountains is not solid and unyielding. It bends and flows, responding to weight and pressure, always seeking equilibrium. The mountain may seem permanent, but the foundation beneath it is always shifting. Fact 74. Mountain weather can change in the time it takes to tie your shoe. A clear morning can turn into a blizzard by afternoon. Sunshine can give way to lightning in minutes. This happens because mountains force air upward, and rising air cools and condenses, forming clouds and storms quickly. Climbers learn to watch the sky constantly, looking for signs of change. They know that the weather does not care about their plans, that the mountain will do what it will do regardless of human schedules. The smart ones turn back when conditions worsen, knowing that the summit will still be there tomorrow, but they might not be if they push too hard. Fact 75. There are legends in almost every culture about mountains. Some say that mountains are the homes of spirits or powerful beings. Others say that mountains are the bones of ancient giants or the remnants of a great flood. These stories exist because mountains inspire awe, because they are so large and so permanent that they seem to exist outside of normal time. People have always looked at mountains and wondered what they are, where they came from, and what they mean. Science has given us answers, but the sense of mystery remains. Standing at the base of a great peak, looking up at stone that has stood for millions of years, it is easy to understand why people once believed that mountains were more than just rock. Fact 76. Mountains collect stories the way they collect snow. Every ridge and valley has been crossed by someone with a tale to tell. Explorers who planted flags on untouched summits, their names recorded in history books, their footprints long since erased by wind and weather. Shepherds who guided their flocks through high meadows every summer for generations, knowing every path, every shelter, every place where water could be found. Soldiers who fought battles in mountain passes, struggling against both the enemy and the terrain, where the cold killed as many men as bullets did. Lovers who carved their initials into trees at scenic overlooks, marking a moment they wanted to last forever. Each person who visits a mountain leaves something behind, even if it is only a memory. The mountain itself does not remember, but the people do. They pass the stories down, parent to child, friend to friend, stranger to stranger around campfires and dinner tables. The mountain becomes more than geology. It becomes a character in the human story, a witness to our joys and struggles and dreams. These stories layer on top of each other like sediment, building up over time until the mountain carries not just rock but meaning, not just height but history. Some stories are true, some are embellished, and some are pure invention, but all of them are part of what makes a mountain more than just a pile of stone. Fact 77. There are valleys between mountains that never see direct sunlight for months during winter. The peaks on either side are so tall that they block the sun completely, casting deep shadows that turn midday into twilight. The temperature in these valleys drops and stays low, frost forming on windows and never melting, ice covering roads and streams in layers that grow thicker each week. People who live in these valleys adapt to the darkness. They light candles and lanterns earlier in the day. They plan their outdoor work for the few hours when reflected light makes it bright enough to see. Children grow up knowing that winter means living in shadow, that the sun still exists but has temporarily abandoned them. They mark the return of the sun as a celebration, gathering together when the first ray of light finally reaches the valley floor after the long darkness. The date is known weeks in advance, calculated based on the angle of the sun and the height of the surrounding peaks. On that morning, people wake early and dress warmly, walking to a spot where they know the light will first appear. Children are held up to feel the warmth on their faces, their eyes closed, their expressions full of wonder. Bells are rung in churches and town squares. Some people cry. The moment is treated as a gift, because that is what it is. The sun has always been there, circling above the peaks, shining on the rest of the world, but for the people below, its return feels like a resurrection, a promise that winter will not last forever, that warmth and growth and colour will come back to their lives. Fact 78. Rockfall is a constant process in mountains. Freeze and thaw cycles cause water to seep into cracks during the day when temperatures rise above freezing. At night, when the temperature drops, the water freezes and expands. Ice is stronger than it looks, and as it expands, it pries the crack wider. This happens day after day, season after season, year after year. The crack grows. Eventually gravity wins and the rock falls, tumbling down the slope in a cascade of stone that sends up clouds of dust and echoes like thunder. These fallen rocks pile up at the base of cliffs in formations called talus slopes, fields of angular boulders that shift and clatter underfoot. Walking across talus requires careful balance and constant attention. Each step must be tested because the rocks are not stable. They rock and tip, and a misplaced foot can send you sprawling, or worse, start a slide that buries you under tons of stone. Yet plants manage to grow here, finding pockets of soil between the stones, putting down roots in a landscape that seems to offer nothing but instability. Moss covers the shaded sides of boulders. Grasses grow in narrow gaps. Even small trees take hold, their roots reaching deep, anchoring themselves against the shifting rocks. Life is opportunistic. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It takes what is available and makes it work. The talus slope, hostile as it seems, becomes home to insects and lizards and small mammals that dart between the rocks, using the jumbled terrain as protection from predators. What looks like chaos is actually a functioning ecosystem, complex and resilient. Fact 79. Some mountains have glaciers that glow blue. This happens because the ice is so compressed and so free of air bubbles that it absorbs all colours of light except blue, which is reflected back. The compression takes centuries. Snow falls and accumulates, and the weight of new snow presses down on the old, squeezing it tighter and tighter until it becomes ice so dense that it behaves more like a liquid than a solid, flowing downhill under its own weight. Walking into a crevasse in one of these glaciers is like stepping into another world. The walls glow with an intense otherworldly blue, luminous even in shadow. The colour is so vivid it does not seem natural, more like something from a dream or a painting. The light seems to come from inside the ice itself, as if the glacier is lit from within by some hidden source. You stand there surrounded by blue and it is hard to think clearly. The beauty is overwhelming and so is the danger. Crevasses are deep, sometimes hundreds of feet, and the ice is slippery. One wrong step and you fall into a crack that may never give you back. Scientists say it is just physics, just the way light interacts with dense ice, photons being absorbed and reflected according to wavelength and molecular structure. But standing inside that blue glow, it is hard not to feel like you are in the presence of something magical, something that exists outside the normal rules of the world. The glacier does not care what you feel. It simply is, beautiful and cold and ancient, a remnant of an age when ice covered much of the planet. Fact 80. Mountain goats give birth on the steepest cliffs they can find. The mother searches for ledges that seem impossible, places where the rock is nearly vertical, and the drop below is hundreds of feet. Within hours of being born, the kid must stand and walk, following its mother across ledges that would terrify most adult animals. There is no time for weakness, no period of protected infancy. The kid's legs are shaky at first, but instinct drives it to move, to follow, to learn balance immediately. A kid that cannot keep up, that stumbles or hesitates, will not survive. This seems harsh, but it is the reality of life in the mountains. The steep cliffs protect the kids from predators that cannot climb as well. Bears, wolves, and cougars all struggle on vertical terrain, and the mother knows this. She chooses the most dangerous terrain because it is also the safest. Evolution has shaped these animals to thrive in a place where most would perish. Their hooves are split, with hard outer edges and soft inner pads that grip the rock. Their sense of balance is extraordinary. They can leap across gaps that look too wide, land on ledges that look too narrow, and stop on slopes that look too steep. Their confidence is not recklessness. It is the result of millions of years of adaptation, instinct refined until it becomes nearly perfect. Watching a mountain goat move is like watching a master at work, every step deliberate, every movement efficient. They do not show off, they do not take unnecessary risks, they simply navigate their world with a skill that seems superhuman, though to them it is ordinary. Fact 81. There are plants that bloom for only one day each year in the mountains. They spend months preparing, growing roots that dig deep into the rocky soil, developing leaves that capture sunlight and convert it into energy through photosynthesis. All of this energy is stored, saved for a single purpose. Then, on a single day, they produce a flower. bright and beautiful, opening in the morning when the sun first touches the slope. The flower must attract pollinators quickly, so it produces nectar and scent, chemical signals that tell bees and flies, and butterflies that food is available. By evening, the flower wilts and closes, its brief moment of glory over. The timing must be perfect. The flower must open when pollinators are active, when the weather is calm enough for insects to fly, when the temperature is right for the pollen to be viable. If the conditions are wrong, if it rains, or if the wind is too strong, or if the temperature drops unexpectedly, the plant may not reproduce that year. It will wait until the next summer and try again. This gamble is repeated every year, a tiny drama of survival playing out on the mountainside, mostly unnoticed by the humans who walk past. The plant does not know if it will succeed. It cannot predict the weather or control the behavior of insects. It simply does what it has always done, what its ancestors did, what evolution has programmed into its cells. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. Over thousands of generations, the timing has been refined, but it is never perfect. The mountain environment is too unpredictable for perfection. All the plant can do is try, year after year, and hope. Fact 82. The highest railway in the world climbs into the mountains of Tibet, reaching over 16,000 feet above sea level. The train cars are pressurized like airplanes because the air outside is too thin to breathe comfortably. Oxygen is pumped into the cabins, and passengers who are not accustomed to high altitude are advised to rest and avoid exertion. Despite these precautions, some people still experience altitude sickness, headaches and nausea caused by the lack of oxygen. Passengers sit by windows and watch the landscape change, from green valleys dotted with farms and villages to barren plateaus where nothing grows except sparse grass and hardy shrubs. The transition is gradual but dramatic, the life draining out of the landscape as the train climbs higher. Forests give way to fields of rock and ice, and the sky becomes a deeper, darker blue. The train moves slowly, not because of mechanical limitations, but because the route is so difficult. It crosses bridges that span deep gorges, narrow structures suspended high above rivers that look like silver threads from this height. It passes through tunnels that burrow through solid rock, some of them miles long, the darkness broken only by the lights inside the train. Building this railway required years of work and incredible engineering. Workers laboured in conditions that made every task difficult. The cold numbed their fingers. The thin air left them breathless after even light exertion. Avalanches and rockfalls threatened their lives. Many became sick, some died. But the work continued, driven by determination and the belief that connecting these remote regions was worth the cost. The mountain did not want a train. It offered no cooperation, only obstacles. But humans persisted, carving a path where none existed before, proving once again that determination can overcome almost any barrier. Fact 83. Lightning scars can be found on rocks at high elevations, places where strikes have melted the surface into glass. These scars are called fulgurites, and they mark the exact spot where lightning made contact with the earth. The temperature of a lightning bolt can reach 50,000 degrees, hotter than the surface of the sun, and when it strikes rock, the minerals melt instantly. The molten rock cools just as quickly, forming a smooth, glassy coating that preserves the shape of the lightning's path. Some fulgurites are small, just a patch of fused stone a few inches across. Others are larger, branching patterns that spread across the rock face like frozen lightning. These scars last for thousands of years, resistant to weathering, a permanent record of a moment that lasted less than a second. Climbers sometimes find these scars and pause to touch them, feeling the smoothness, thinking about the power required to melt stone in an instant. It is humbling, a reminder that the forces at work in the mountains are far beyond human scale. The mountain has been struck countless times, each strike leaving a mark, a reminder that the air above the peaks is alive with electricity during storms. Some mountains are struck more often than others, their height and isolation making them natural targets for lightning. During a storm, the peaks glow with electricity, and thunder echoes through the valleys like the earth itself is speaking. Climbers caught on exposed ridges during these storms experience terror that is difficult to describe. The air hums with energy. Hair stands on end. Metal equipment buzzes and sparks. The only option is to descend as quickly as possible, to get below the tree line or into a valley where the risk is lower. The mountain does not care about human fear. It simply conducts the electricity, channeling it into the ground, indifferent to whatever happens to stand in the way. Fact 84. Some mountains have permanent residents who never leave. Hermits and monks have chosen mountains as places of solitude and contemplation for thousands of years. They build small shelters from stone and wood, simple structures that blend into the landscape and offer just enough protection from the weather. They grow what food they can in tiny gardens, often just a few vegetables and herbs, and supplement this with supplies brought up by occasional visitors or carried up themselves during trips to the valley below. Their days are spent in silence and prayer, in meditation and reflection, in routines that have been followed for centuries. They wake with the sun, perform their rituals, tend their gardens, and sit in contemplation as the day passes. The mountain offers them what the valley cannot, a separation from the noise and distraction of the world below. There are no phones here, no internet, no news of wars or politics or markets. There is only the mountain, the weather, the passage of seasons, and the inner life of the mind and spirit. Visitors sometimes climb to these remote dwellings, seeking wisdom or simply curious about how anyone could live in such isolation. The path is steep and difficult, and by the time they arrive, they are exhausted and humbled. The hermits welcome them, offer tea made from mountain herbs, share a few words about life and peace and the nature of suffering. Then the visitors leave, and the hermits return to their silence. They have found something in the mountain that most people spend their whole lives searching for, a sense of peace that does not depend on circumstances, a stillness that comes from within. The mountain has not given them this peace. It has simply provided a place where they could find it, away from everything that makes finding it difficult. Fact 85. The reflection of mountains in still water has inspired artists for centuries. Painters set up easels beside alpine lakes, trying to capture the way the peaks mirror themselves perfectly, creating a symmetry that feels almost unreal. They mix colours on their palettes, searching for the exact shade of blue in the water, the precise tone of grey in the rock, the subtle shift of light as clouds pass overhead. Some spend days or weeks on a single painting, returning to the same spot each morning to catch the light at the same angle. Photographers wait for windless mornings when the surface of the water is glass smooth, their cameras mounted on tripods, their fingers poised over the shutter button, waiting for the perfect moment when the reflection is so clear that it becomes impossible to tell which half of the image is real and which is reflection. There is something hypnotic about these reflections, the way they blur the line between what is real and what is image. The mountain stands solid and unmovable, but its reflection ripples and disappears with the slightest breeze. A single drop of rain creates circles that spread outward, distorting the image until the mountain in the water becomes abstract, shapes and colours that no longer match the solid form above. Then the water stills again, and the mountain returns perfect and complete. It is a reminder that even the most permanent things can seem fragile depending on how we see them, that reality is not always as stable as we believe, that perception and truth are not always the same thing. Artists understand this instinctively. They know that what we see is not the mountain itself, but light, reflecting off the mountain, filtered through our eyes and interpreted by our brains. The reflection in the water is no less real than the view of the mountain itself. Both are images, both are interpretations. The mountain exists independently of either, solid and indifferent to how it is seen. Fact 86. Mountain sheep have horns that curl in massive spirals, growing throughout their entire lives. Unlike antlers, which are shed and regrown each year, horns are permanent, adding new growth at the base each season. The horns can weigh up to 30 pounds, a significant burden that the rams carry with apparent ease. These horns are not just for show. They are weapons and shields, used in battles for dominance that determine which rams will mate and which will not. During mating season, the sound of rams crashing their horns together echoes across the slopes, a hollow crack that can be heard from miles away. The rams face each other, lower their heads, and then rear up on their hind legs before charging. They meet head-on with tremendous force, the impact reverberating through their bodies, the sound sharp and clear in the thin mountain air. They back up and charge again and again, sometimes for hours, until one ram gives up and retreats. These battles rarely result in serious injury because the skull is designed to absorb the impact. The bone is thick and layered, with air pockets that act as cushioning, distributing the force of the blow. The horns themselves are made of keratin, the same material as human fingernails, but far denser and stronger. The mountain sheep have been doing this for thousands of years, and the ritual never changes. It is as much a part of the mountain as the rocks themselves, a display of strength and determination that has been refined over countless generations. The rams do not fight out of anger or hatred. They fight because instinct compels them, because the drive to reproduce is stronger than the fear of pain. The winner earns the right to pass on his characteristics to the next generation, ensuring that strength and resilience continue. The loser walks away, nursing bruises but otherwise unharmed, and waits for another opportunity. The mountain watches all of this without comment, indifferent to the outcome. Fact 87. There are mountains that change ownership depending on the season. Glaciers that straddle international borders shift and flow, and the border shifts with them. What was in one country last year might be in another country this year. This creates complex diplomatic situations, because borders are supposed to be fixed, permanent lines that define where one nation ends and another begins. But glaciers do not respect these lines. They move according to their own logic, flowing downhill under the pressure of their own weight, advancing in winter when snowfall adds mass and retreating in summer when melting reduces their size. Surveying teams return regularly to measure and remark the boundaries, planting poles and painting rocks, trying to maintain some sense of order. But the mountain does not care about human agreements. It moves according to its own laws, indifferent to the lines drawn on maps. This creates strange legal situations, disputes over tiny patches of rock and ice that hold no strategic value but matter because they represent sovereignty, because nations take pride in their territory no matter how small or insignificant. Lawyers and diplomats meet to discuss these matters, drafting agreements that try to account for the glacier's movement, creating flexible boundaries that adjust over time. The discussions are serious and sometimes heated, even though everyone involved knows that the argument is essentially absurd. The mountain is not trying to cause problems, it is simply being a mountain, doing what mountains do, which is change slowly and inexorably. The mountain outlasts every government, every treaty, every flag planted on its slopes. Long after the current nations have faded into history, the mountain will still be here, still moving, still indifferent to human concerns. Fact 88. The sound of a mountain stream is made up of thousands of individual noises layered together. Water rushing over rocks creates a constant roar, but within that roar are countless variations. Water splashing against stones makes a higher, sharper sound. Water gurgling through narrow channels creates bubbles that pop and hiss. Water dropping over small waterfalls adds a deeper rumble. All of these sounds combine into a continuous roar that drowns out everything else, a white noise that fills the ears and pushes out thought. People who camp beside mountain streams say they sleep better than anywhere else, lulled by the constant sound. The stream never stops, never pauses, flowing day and night, summer and winter, year after year. Even when the surface freezes, water continues to flow beneath the ice, muffled but still moving. The stream is carving the mountain away grain by grain, patient and persistent, shaping the landscape one molecule at a time. Each droplet carries a tiny amount of sediment, rock dissolved by the water or worn away by friction. This sediment travels downstream, settling in calmer waters or continuing all the way to the ocean. In 1,000,000 years, the stream will have moved the entire mountain downstream, carrying it to the ocean as sand and silt. The mountain will be gone, but the rock will remain, just in a different form, spread across the ocean floor or compressed into new stone by tectonic forces. Nothing is permanent, everything is in motion, even when that motion is too slow to see. Fact 89. There are flowers in the mountains that trap heat. Their petals form a bowl shape that focuses sunlight toward the center, creating a warm microclimate that attracts insects. The temperature inside the flower can be several degrees warmer than the surrounding air, a significant difference in an environment where every degree matters. Bees and flies crawl into these flowers seeking warmth, especially in the early morning when the air is still cold and their muscles are stiff. While they are there, basking in the trapped heat, they pick up pollen and carry it to the next flower. The plant has engineered its own greenhouse, a tiny pocket of warmth in a cold environment, a solution to the problem of pollination in a place where insects are scarce and the growing season is short. This is not conscious design, but the result of countless generations of trial and error, mutations that succeeded and were passed on. A flower with slightly curved petals trapped slightly more heat and attracted slightly more insects, and over time, this advantage compounded. The flower does not know why it is shaped this way. It simply grows, following instructions encoded in its cells, and the shape works, and so it continues. Evolution is not a conscious process, but it produces results that look intentional, solutions that seem clever and well-planned. The mountain flower is a small example of a universal principle that life adapts to its environment, finding ways to survive and reproduce no matter how difficult the conditions. Fact 90. Mountain climbers often experience something called summit fever. As they get close to the top, rational thinking becomes difficult. The desire to reach the summit overwhelms caution and good judgment. Climbers push on despite worsening weather, despite exhaustion, despite clear signs that they should turn back. Their vision narrows. They stop seeing the whole situation and focus only on the goal. The summit becomes everything, the only thing that matters, and the risks fade into the background. Many deaths in the mountains happen because of summit fever, people who get within sight of their goal and cannot bring themselves to retreat. They tell themselves they have come too far to turn back now, that they can make it if they just push a little harder, that this is their only chance. But the mountain does not reward stubbornness. It rewards wisdom, the ability to recognize when the cost is too high, when continuing means risking not just failure but death. The summit will always be there, unchanged and patient, but life is not so patient. A climber who dies on the way down has not truly reached the summit, because reaching the summit means coming home to tell the story. The mountain teaches this lesson harshly to those who refuse to learn it any other way. Experienced climbers know this. They set turnaround times, predetermined points where they will stop and descend regardless of how close they are to the top. They make these decisions in advance when their minds are clear, so that in the heat of the climb, when judgment is clouded by altitude and exhaustion and desire, they have a rule to fall back on. The rule is simple. The mountain does not care about your goals. It only cares about reality. Respect reality or pay the price. Fact 91. Some mountains have trees that are thousands of years old. Bristlecone pines grow in harsh, high-altitude environments where almost nothing else can survive. They grow slowly, adding only a fraction of an inch each year, their wood dense and resinous, resistant to rot and insects. Some of these trees were already ancient when the pyramids were built. They were saplings when humans were just beginning to develop agriculture, when cities did not exist, when most people lived in small tribes and survived by hunting and gathering. These trees have survived droughts that lasted decades, fires that burned across the mountains, lightning strikes that split them in half, and centuries of wind that has sculpted their trunks into twisted, gnarled shapes. Their branches point away from the prevailing wind, all growing in the same direction, a record of the wind's persistence written in wood. The bristlecone pine does not look like other trees. There is nothing graceful or symmetrical about it. Its trunk is often bare on one side, stripped of bark by wind and ice, the wood underneath bleached white by sun and exposure. Only a thin strip of living bark remains, sometimes just a few inches wide, connecting the roots to a handful of branches that still produce needles. This strip of bark is enough. The tree does not need much to survive. It has learned to live on almost nothing, to endure conditions that would kill any other tree within a season. The needles themselves are remarkable, staying on the tree for up to 40 years, far longer than the needles of other pines. This means the tree does not have to waste energy growing new needles every year. It conserves, it saves, it makes the most of every resource available. Scientists study their rings to learn about past climates, drilling cores from the trunk and extracting thin cylinders of wood. Each ring records the conditions of a single year. A wide ring means the tree grew well that year, indicating warmth and moisture. A narrow ring means conditions were poor, the year cold or dry. By reading these rings, scientists can reconstruct the climate going back thousands of years, identifying droughts and wet periods, warm spells and cold snaps. Some of these trees have over 4,000 rings, which means they have been alive longer than recorded human history. They were young trees when the first alphabets were being invented, when the wheel was still a new technology, when most of humanity lived lives we would not recognize. The tree is a living archive, carrying history in its body, silent and steadfast. Walking among these ancient trees is a humbling experience. They stand on rocky slopes where the soil is thin and poor, where water is scarce, where the growing season lasts only a few weeks each year. They are scattered, not growing in dense forests, but as individuals, each one separated from its neighbours by yards or even hundreds of feet. This isolation is part of their survival strategy. If they grew close together, a fire could consume them all. Spread out, some will survive even if others burn. The landscape around them is stark, almost lunar. Rocks and gravel, patches of hardy grass, a few low shrubs. The air is thin and cold and the wind never stops. It is not a place that invites comfort. Yet these trees have made it their home, not just surviving but thriving in their own slow, patient way. The oldest known bristlecone pine, nicknamed Methuselah, is over 4,800 years old. Its exact location is kept secret to protect it from vandalism, but it grows somewhere, in the White Mountains of California, on a slope that looks like every other slope in the area. There is nothing obviously special about it. It does not tower over the other trees. It is not particularly large or impressive. It simply is, continuing to add one ring each year, continuing to produce cones and seeds, continuing to do what it has done for nearly 5 millennia. The tree does not know it is famous. It does not care about the scientists who study it or the visitors who come hoping to see it. It simply continues to grow, adding one ring each year, surviving in a place where survival itself is an achievement. These trees remind us that life is not always about speed or size or dominance. Sometimes it is about endurance, about lasting, about being present year after year through whatever comes. The bristlecone pine does not grow quickly. It does not spread aggressively. It does not compete effectively with other trees in more hospitable environments. But in this harsh place, where water is scarce and the growing season is short, it has no competition. It has found a niche where its strategy works, where slow growth and extreme durability are advantages rather than weaknesses. The mountain has shaped this tree, and the tree has adapted to the mountain, and together they have created something that can measure time in millennia rather than decades. Fact 92. There are passes through mountains that are only open for a few months each year. Snow closes them in autumn, and they remain buried under drifts that can be 20 or 30 feet deep until late spring. For the people who live on either side, these passes are lifelines, the only routes connecting them to neighbouring valleys without travelling hundreds of miles around the mountains. When the snow finally melts and the pass opens, it is an event, something people look forward to and prepare for. Traders cross with goods, bringing supplies that have been unavailable all winter, carrying news from the outside world. Families reunite, separated members returning from work or school in distant cities. Letters are delivered, often months old, bringing news of births and deaths and weddings. The opening of the pass marks a transition, the end of isolation, and the beginning of connection. The closing of the pass in autumn is equally significant. People watch the weather, noting when the first serious snows begin to fall. They know from experience that once the snow reaches a certain depth, the pass will be impassable until spring. There is usually a last convoy, a final group of travellers and traders making the crossing before winter locks the door. They hurry, knowing that if they are caught by a storm they could be trapped, forced to wait it out in emergency shelters built along the route for exactly this purpose. These shelters are simple stone structures, barely more than windbreaks, stocked with firewood and basic supplies by the communities on either side. They have saved many lives over the years, providing refuge when the weather turns suddenly dangerous. Once the pass is closed, the communities on either side turn inward. They rely on what they have stored, on the people nearby, on their own resources. This enforced isolation creates a particular kind of social structure. People must get along because there is no leaving until spring. Disputes must be resolved because there is nowhere to escape to. The community becomes everything, and maintaining harmony becomes essential. In some ways, this creates stronger bonds. People know their neighbours not as casual acquaintances but as essential partners in survival. They share resources, help with repairs and emergencies, and celebrate together because there is no one else to celebrate with. The waiting for the pass to open begins in early spring. People watch the snow line creep up the mountains, noting how much snow remains, estimating when it will be safe to attempt a crossing. Scouts are sent out, experienced travellers who know the route and can judge conditions. They report back on the depth of the snow, the stability of the snowpack, the condition of the trail. When they declare the pass open, it is a moment of relief and joy. The first convoy through is often a celebration. People from both sides meeting at the summit, exchanging greetings and gifts, acknowledging that another winter has been survived. The pass itself is often marked by cairns and shrines, places where travellers leave offerings or say prayers. The significance of these places is both practical and spiritual. Practically, they mark the highest point, the halfway point, the place where you stop climbing and start descending. Spiritually, they represent a threshold, a crossing from one world to another. Many cultures that live near mountain passes have traditions associated with them, rituals performed before crossing, offerings made to ensure safe passage. These traditions persist even in modern times, even among people who no longer believe in the specific religious meanings. The act of marking the crossing, of pausing to acknowledge the significance of the moment, remains important. The mountain controls the rhythm of life here, deciding when people can meet and when they must stay apart. It is a power that no government or technology has been able to overcome completely. Roads can be ploughed, but avalanches are unpredictable and dangerous. A road can be clear 1 hour and buried under tons of snow the next. Tunnels can be built, but they are expensive and take years to construct. They require constant maintenance and still close during the worst weather. For most mountain communities, the seasonal rhythm continues as it has for centuries. In winter, you turn inward, relying on what you have stored, on the people nearby, on your own resources. In summer, you expand outward, trading and travelling and connecting. The mountain enforces this rhythm, and the people accept it because they have no choice. This seasonal isolation shapes culture in profound ways. Stories and songs are more important when there is no television or internet to provide entertainment. Skills are passed down through direct teaching, parent to child, master to apprentice, because there is no other way to learn. Self-reliance is valued not as an abstract ideal, but as a practical necessity. When help is hours or days away, you must be able to solve your own problems. Yet paradoxically, this self-reliance coexists with strong community bonds. You must be able to help yourself, but you must also be willing to help others, because next time you might be the one who needs help. The pass is more than just a route. It is a symbol of connection, a reminder that even in the most isolated places, people are linked to the wider world. The closing and opening of the pass marks time as surely as any calendar, dividing the year into periods of isolation and connection, inward focus and outward engagement. For people who live in these communities, the rhythm becomes natural, as inevitable as the seasons themselves. They do not resent the mountain for closing the pass. They accept it as part of life, adapting their expectations and their activities to match what the mountain allows. Fact 93. Mountain ranges create rain patterns that feed entire continents. Moisture-laden air from the ocean moves inland, carried by prevailing winds. When this air hits a mountain range, it is forced upward. As it rises, it cools, and cool air cannot hold as much moisture as warm air. The moisture condenses into droplets that fall as rain or snow, drenching the windward slopes. This rain fills rivers that flow down into the lowlands, watering crops and cities hundreds of miles away. Without the mountains, these regions would be deserts, dry and lifeless. The mountains are the reason there is life in places that should be barren. They do this not out of generosity, but simply by existing, by standing in the way of the wind. It is an accidental gift, but one that billions of people and countless species depend on absolutely. The scale of this process is difficult to comprehend. A single mountain range can determine the climate for an area larger than many countries. The Himalayas, for example, capture moisture from monsoon winds coming from the Indian Ocean. The rain that falls on the southern slopes feeds rivers like the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Indus, which in turn support over 1 billion people. These rivers provide water for drinking, irrigation industry, and power generation. They have shaped civilizations, determined where cities could grow, and influenced the course of history, all because a mountain range happens to stand in the path of moisture-bearing winds. The process is not uniform. Some parts of a mountain range receive far more precipitation than others, depending on orientation, elevation, and local topography. A valley that opens toward the prevailing winds might receive abundant rain, while a valley just a few miles away but oriented differently might be dry. These micro-variations create a patchwork of different climates and ecosystems, all within a relatively small area. A botanist walking across a mountain range might document dozens of different plant communities, each adapted to specific conditions of moisture, temperature, and soil. The rivers that begin in the mountains carry more than just water. They carry nutrients washed from the rocks, minerals dissolved over centuries by the slow action of water on stone. They carry sediment, fine particles of rock ground down by glaciers or broken loose by freeze-thaw cycles. This sediment is not waste. When rivers flood, they deposit this sediment on their floodplains, enriching the soil and making it fertile. The ancient Egyptians understood this, building their civilization around the annual flooding of the Nile, which brought nutrient-rich silt from the mountains of Ethiopia. They did not need to fertilize their fields artificially because the river did it for them, year after year, a gift from mountains they had never seen. The rivers shape the land as they flow, carving valleys and creating floodplains, building deltas where they meet the ocean. These deltas are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth, rich in nutrients, teeming with life, and ideal for agriculture. Entire civilizations have risen in river deltas, from the Mesopotamians between the Tigris and Euphrates to the Vietnamese in the Mekong Delta. These places exist because mountains captured moisture and rivers carried it, along with nutrients and sediment, to the sea. The mountains are reservoirs, storing water during wet seasons and releasing it slowly during dry seasons, moderating the flow and preventing both floods and droughts. Snow that falls in winter accumulates on the peaks, and in spring and summer it melts gradually, feeding rivers at a steady rate. This natural regulation is crucial for ecosystems and human societies downstream. A river that floods violently and then dries up completely is far less useful than one that flows steadily year-round. The mountains provide this steadiness, acting as natural water towers that release their contents slowly. This system works because the mountains are patient, because they release water gradually rather than all at once. Human societies have learned to depend on this pattern, planting crops according to when the rivers will rise, building cities in places where water is reliable. Entire economies are structured around the seasonal rhythm of mountain rivers. Hydroelectric dams are built to capture this flow, generating power for millions of people. Irrigation systems are designed to divert water to fields during the growing season. Urban water supplies are planned around the expectation that rivers will continue to flow. But the system is delicate. If the mountains lose their snow and ice, if the climate changes too quickly, the pattern will break, and the consequences will be severe. Glaciers are melting faster than they are being replenished. Snowpack is declining in many mountain ranges. The steady flow of water that has sustained civilizations for thousands of years is becoming less predictable. Some rivers now flood more violently in spring as snow melts rapidly, then run dry in summer when there is no snow left to melt. This change is happening within a human lifetime, fast enough that people can see it, feel it, worry about it. The relationship between mountains and water is one of the fundamental patterns that makes life on Earth possible. Mountains force air upward, air cools and releases moisture. Moisture falls as rain or snow, water collects in rivers. Rivers flow to the lowlands and eventually to the sea. This cycle has been repeating for millions of years, shaping landscapes, creating ecosystems, enabling life. The mountains do not know they are doing this. They simply exist, and the physics of atmosphere and gravity do the rest. but the result is a planet where water is distributed far beyond the oceans, where deserts have rivers running through them, where life can flourish in places that would otherwise be barren. Fact 94. There are insects in the mountains that can only survive in specific temperature ranges. They have adapted to the cold, their bodies producing chemicals that act like antifreeze, lowering the temperature at which their cells would freeze and die. But there are limits to this adaptation. If it gets too warm, these insects cannot survive. Their metabolisms speed up, they burn through energy too quickly, and they die from heat stress. A warming climate is pushing these insects higher and higher, chasing the cold they need. Each decade, the zone where they can survive shifts upward, and they follow, moving into previously uninhabitable areas near the peaks. But there is only so much mountain. Eventually they will run out of altitude, and when that happens, they will have nowhere left to go. The mechanics of this are straightforward but inexorable. Temperature decreases with altitude at a predictable rate, roughly 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet of elevation. As global temperatures rise, the temperature at any given altitude also rises. The zone where a particular insect can survive shifts upward. The insect does not make a conscious decision to move. It simply finds that the lower elevations where it used to live are now too warm. Individuals that venture higher survive better and reproduce more. Over generations, the population shifts upward, tracking the temperature range it needs. Scientists are watching this happen in real time, documenting species moving upward year by year, tracking populations as they shrink and fragment. In some mountain ranges, researchers have been studying the same slopes for decades, noting which species are found at which elevations. When they compare their data from 20 or 30 years ago to current surveys, the pattern is clear. Species that used to be common at lower elevations are now rare or absent. Those same species are now found higher up, in places where they were previously uncommon or absent. The entire community is shifting upward, like a slow-motion evacuation. This upward movement creates problems. As species move higher, they leave behind the lower elevation habitats that no longer suit them. These habitats do not remain empty. Other species, ones that prefer warmer temperatures, move in. The mountain ecosystem is reorganizing, with cold-adapted species being pushed toward the peaks and warm-adapted species expanding their range upward. This might seem like a simple shift, everyone moving up a level, but it is not that simple. The species moving upward are leaving behind predators, competitors, and food sources. They are moving into areas that may not have the plants they eat or the nesting sites they need. The whole system is being disrupted. Some will adapt, evolving quickly enough to tolerate warmer temperatures. Evolution can happen surprisingly fast when the selective pressure is strong. Insects that can tolerate slightly warmer temperatures will survive and reproduce, passing on their genes. Over many generations, the population might adapt, but evolution is not always fast enough, and many species will not make it. They will disappear, not because they were weak, but because the world changed too quickly for them to keep up. Evolution requires variation, and if there is not enough genetic variation in the population to produce individuals that can tolerate the new conditions, the species will go extinct. The mountain cannot save them. It can only provide space for as long as the conditions allow. What happens next depends on forces much larger than any individual mountain, forces that span the entire planet and are driven by human activity. The insects do not understand this. They simply move upward, following the temperature gradient, doing what instinct tells them to do. They are not aware that they are running out of room, that the summit is approaching, that beyond the summit there is only air. When a species reaches the summit and can go no higher, it is trapped. If temperatures continue to rise, the zone where it can survive shrinks to a smaller and smaller area at the very top of the mountain. The population contracts, and small populations face additional problems. Genetic diversity decreases. Random events, like a particularly harsh winter or a disease outbreak, can wipe out a significant portion of the population. Breeding partners become harder to find. The species enters what ecologists call an extinction vortex, a series of problems that reinforce each other and make recovery increasingly unlikely. This is not just a theoretical concern. It is already happening. Some mountain species have gone extinct in recent decades, disappearing from peaks where they had lived for thousands of years. Others are critically endangered, hanging on in tiny refuges at the highest elevations. Researchers document these losses, publishing papers with titles that hint at the tragedy unfolding. Upward range shifts in mountain butterflies, elevational range contractions in tropical montane birds, climate-driven extinctions in mountain endemic species. The language is academic, but the meaning is clear. Species are losing their homes, and some of them are running out of mountain. The broader implications are troubling. Mountains are biodiversity hotspots, home to a disproportionate number of species compared to lowland areas. This is partly because mountains create so many different microclimates and habitats within a small area. A single mountain might have tropical forests at its base, temperate forests midway up, alpine tundra near the summit, and permanent ice at the peak. Each zone supports different species, and the transitions between zones create additional niches. If warming temperatures compress or eliminate these zones, the biodiversity they support is at risk. Humans often think of climate change in terms of how it will affect us, where we will live, what we will eat, how we will adapt. But we are not the only ones affected. Thousands of species are already experiencing the consequences, and many of them lack the ability to adapt or migrate. The insects moving up the mountain are canaries in the coal mine, early warning signs of disruptions that will eventually affect entire ecosystems. The mountains are changing, not because they want to, but because the world around them is changing, and they have no choice but to respond. Fact 95. The tradition of piling stones into cairns is found in mountains all over the world. Travellers add a stone to mark their passage to say, "I was here." The act is simple, taking only a moment, but it connects the person to everyone who has passed before and everyone who will come after. Over time, these cairns grow taller, becoming landmarks that guide future travellers. Some cairns are ancient, built so long ago that no one remembers who started them or why. They have grown through the contributions of thousands of people, each adding a single stone, each participating in something larger than themselves. Others are new, just a few stones stacked by a hiker last summer, a small mark in a vast landscape. The practice of building cairns predates written history. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans have been piling stones for tens of thousands of years, using them as trail markers, burial monuments, and territorial markers. In the mountains, where trails can be hard to follow and landmarks can look similar, cairns serve a practical purpose. They guide travellers, marking the route through difficult terrain. A well-placed cairn can mean the difference between staying on the trail and becoming lost, between reaching shelter before dark and spending a dangerous night exposed on the mountain. But cairns are more than just practical markers. They carry symbolic weight. Adding a stone to a cairn is a ritual, an acknowledgement of the journey and the mountain. It is a way of saying thank you to those who came before, who built the cairn high enough that you could see it, who marked the trail so you could follow it. It is also a gift to those who will come after, making the cairn a little taller, a little more visible, a little easier to find. This reciprocity across time, this exchange between past and future travellers who will never meet, is part of what makes the practice meaningful. There is something deeply human about this practice, the desire to leave a mark, to prove that we existed, to participate in something that will outlast us. We know our individual lives are brief, but by adding to something that will continue after we are gone, we become part of a larger story. The cairn will stand long after we have descended, long after we have forgotten the details of the hike, perhaps even long after we have died. Future travellers will see it and benefit from it, never knowing who built it but understanding that someone cared enough to mark the way. The mountain does not need these cairns. They serve no purpose for the rock and ice and wind, but we do. They connect us to the people who walked this path before us, and to those who will come after. They say, without words, that we are not alone, that others have struggled with this climb, that the journey we are on is part of a larger story. In a landscape that can feel indifferent or even hostile, cairns are evidence of human presence and human care. They remind us that people have been coming to this mountain for generations, facing the same challenges, feeling the same mix of fear and exhilaration, and choosing to help those who follow. Some people criticize the building of cairns, saying that they are unnecessary, that they clutter the landscape, that nature should be left unmarked. There is truth in this. Too many cairns can diminish the wilderness, turning it into something too obviously touched by human hands. In popular areas, cairns sometimes proliferate beyond usefulness, with dozens of small stone piles scattered across a single meadow or ridgeline. These are often built not to mark a trail, but simply because building cairns has become a thing people do, a way to leave a mark without considering whether that mark is needed or wanted. But a single cairn, standing at a difficult spot or marking a junction in the trail, is different. It is a gift from one traveller to another, a simple act of kindness in a place where kindness can make a difference. There is an etiquette to cairn building in many hiking communities. Build them only where they are needed. Make them visible but not ostentatious. Use stones from the immediate area. Do not build multiple cairns where one will do. Respect existing cairns rather than building new ones nearby. These guidelines preserve the usefulness of cairns while minimizing their impact on the landscape. In some cultures, cairns have specific spiritual significance. Tibetan travelers build cairns called lhatho, adding stones while saying prayers and sometimes leaving offerings of food or cloth. Each stone added is believed to bring merit, to honor the mountain spirits, to ensure safe passage. The act is both practical and devotional, marking the trail while also acknowledging that the mountain is sacred, that crossing it is not just a physical act but a spiritual one. Similar traditions exist in Mongolia, where ovus serve as shrines and trail markers, and in the Arctic, where Inuit build inuksut, stone figures that resemble human forms and serve as navigational aids. The cairn is a humble structure, just stones balanced on top of each other, but it embodies something essential about human nature. We are social creatures, and even in solitude, even in wild places where we might not see another person for days, we reach out. We leave signs for others. We build things that will help people we will never meet. The cairn is a physical manifestation of this impulse, a small act of generosity and foresight. It costs almost nothing to build, just a moment of time and a little effort, but it can provide reassurance and guidance to countless future travellers. Fact 96. Mountain rescue teams train for years to learn how to save people in extreme conditions. They practice carrying injured climbers down steep slopes on stretchers, learning how to secure the stretcher, how to lower it on ropes, how to move efficiently despite exhaustion and cold. They practice performing medical procedures in blizzards, their hands numb inside gloves, their vision obscured by blowing snow. They learn how to locate people buried in avalanches, using probes and trained dogs, digging frantically because they know that survival time is measured in minutes, not hours. The work is dangerous and exhausting, often done in the middle of the night in terrible weather, because accidents do not wait for convenient times. The training begins long before anyone joins a rescue team. Most rescuers are experienced mountaineers themselves, people who have spent years climbing, who know the mountains intimately, who understand the dangers not from textbooks, but from personal experience. They know what it feels like to be caught in a storm, to lose the trail in fog, to feel the terror of a slip on icy rock. This experience is essential because it gives them the judgment to assess situations quickly and make decisions under pressure. They can look at a slope and estimate avalanche risk. They can read weather patterns and predict how conditions will change. They can gauge whether an injured person can be moved or needs to be stabilized first. The technical skills required are extensive. Rescuers must be expert rope handlers, able to set up complex systems for lowering stretchers down cliffs. They must be trained in wilderness first aid and able to treat injuries with limited equipment in harsh conditions. They must be skilled navigators, able to find their way in darkness and bad weather. They must be physically fit enough to hike for hours while carrying heavy packs and then perform demanding work at the end of the hike. And they must be mentally tough enough to stay focused and effective even when exhausted, cold, and aware that someone's life depends on their performance. A call comes in, and the team mobilizes, gathering equipment, checking weather conditions, planning the route. The call might come from a hiker who twisted an ankle and cannot walk out, or from a climber who has fallen and is seriously injured, or from someone who is simply lost and nightfall is approaching. The team gathers whatever information is available. Where was the person last seen? What was their planned route? What is their condition? What is the weather doing? This information guides the response, but often there is not much to go on. The team must be prepared for anything. They climb quickly, pushing their own limits, because someone is waiting, injured or lost or trapped, and time is running out. The climb is hard even for experienced mountaineers, but rescuers do it while carrying extra equipment, medical supplies, ropes, stretchers, radios, and whatever else might be needed. Their packs can weigh 60 or 70 pounds. They move as fast as they can while staying safe, because a rescuer who becomes injured or lost is now part of the problem rather than the solution. The mountain does not make it easy. If anything, conditions during rescues are often worse than normal because the same weather that caused the accident is still present. When they reach the person in need, the work begins. Medical assessment and treatment come first. Stabilize the injured, stop any bleeding, immobilize fractures, treat for shock and hypothermia. Then comes the difficult task of getting the person off the mountain. In some cases, a helicopter can be called in, but helicopters cannot fly in bad weather or at night, and there are many places in the mountains where they cannot safely land or hover. Often the evacuation must be done on foot, the injured person secured in a stretcher and carried down by the team. Carrying a stretcher down a mountain is brutally difficult work. The weight is awkward and unbalanced. The terrain is steep and unstable. The team must move carefully, testing each step, coordinating their movements so the stretcher stays level and does not swing or tip. They take turns, rotating positions because no one can carry for long without becoming exhausted. They set up rope systems to lower the stretcher down cliffs or steep sections. They cross streams, navigate boulder fields, work through forests in darkness. Hours pass, muscles burn, but they do not stop. They cannot stop. Someone is depending on them. Yet when someone is hurt or lost, these teams go without hesitation, without payment, often without even being asked. They know the mountain better than almost anyone, and they use that knowledge to bring people home. Many rescuers are volunteers taking time away from their families and jobs to help strangers. They get a call in the middle of the night and they go, leaving warm beds and important obligations because someone needs help, and they have the skills to provide it. They do not get paid. The most they might receive is reimbursement for expenses, but even that is not guaranteed. They do it because they love the mountains, and because they understand that everyone who goes into the mountains deserves a chance to come back. They do it because they have been in situations where luck or skill or help from others made the difference, and they want to give that same chance to others. Many rescuers can tell stories of times when they needed help, when weather turned bad or an accident happened or they made a mistake, and someone was there to help them. They remember what that felt like, the relief and gratitude, and they want to pay it forward. The community of people who love mountains is small, and there is an unspoken agreement that we look out for each other, that when someone needs help we provide it. The mountain does not help them. It offers no cooperation. If anything, it makes their work harder, throwing obstacles in their way, testing their determination. Rockfall does not stop during rescues. Storms do not clear. Avalanches do not wait. The rescuers work in spite of the mountain, succeeding through skill and effort and stubborn refusal to give up. But they persist, and more often than not they succeed. They bring people down alive, injured but breathing, grateful and humbled. The rescued person is reunited with family, receives medical care, recovers. The story has a happy ending, though it could easily have ended differently. The rescuers do not expect thanks. They pack up their equipment, return to their homes, and wait for the next call, knowing it will come eventually, because the mountains are beautiful but unforgiving, and people will always be drawn to them despite the risks. They do not judge the people they rescue. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone underestimates the mountain sometimes. The rescuers themselves have made mistakes and survived, often by luck as much as skill. They understand that the line between a successful climb and a rescue situation is often thin, that anyone who spends enough time in the mountains will eventually need help, so they train and they wait, and when the call comes, they go. Fact 97. There are valleys in mountains that have never been logged or farmed or touched by development. They remain as they have been for thousands of years, forests thick and dark, streams running clear over clean gravel, meadows filled with wildflowers that bloom in waves as the season progresses. These places are rare now, protected by law or by their sheer inaccessibility, surrounded by terrain so difficult that the cost of extracting resources outweighs the profit. To walk into one of these valleys is to step backward in time, to see the world as it was before humans reshaped it to suit their needs. The forest in these valleys is different from managed forests. The trees are varied in age and size, from saplings taking advantage of a gap in the canopy to ancient giants that were already mature when European explorers first reached these shores. Dead trees stand upright as snags, their bark fallen away, their wood slowly weathering and providing habitat for insects and birds. Fallen logs lie across the forest floor in various stages of decay, some still solid, others so rotten they crumble when you step on them. This deadwood is not waste. It is habitat, nursery, nutrient bank. Salamanders hide under it. Fungi break it down, releasing nutrients back into the soil. New trees sprout from it, their roots growing over and through the decaying wood. Fact 98. The rock that forms mountains is recycled. It begins as sediment at the bottom of the ocean, tiny particles of sand and clay, and the remains of sea creatures settling slowly through the water and accumulating on the seafloor. Over millions of years, the weight of new sediment compresses the old, squeezing out water and air, cementing the particles together into solid rock. This sedimentary rock records the conditions of its formation. Layers of different colours indicate changes in the environment. Fossils embedded in the rock tell us what creatures lived when that layer was being formed. The rock is an archive preserving information about ancient oceans and climates, and life. Fact 19. Standing on a mountain at sunrise is a spiritual experience for many people, regardless of their beliefs. The world below is still dark, valleys filled with shadow, forests invisible beneath a blanket of night. But the peak catches the first light, glowing gold and orange and pink as the sun rises behind the Earth's curve. The colours are intense, almost unnatural, more vivid than any sunset. This happens because light is travelling through more atmosphere at sunrise, scattering the shorter blue wavelengths and allowing the longer red and orange wavelengths to dominate. The effect is dramatic, the peak glowing as if lit from within while everything around it remains dark. You are higher than the clouds, higher than the birds, standing in a place that feels closer to the infinite. The boundary between earth and sky seems thin here, less definite than it does at lower elevations. The air is so clear that stars are still visible in the western sky even as the sun rises in the east. The silence is complete except for the wind, which never stops at high altitude, a constant presence that shapes everything, from the direction trees grow to the patterns in the snow to the way sound carries. Fact 100. Mountains teach us humility. No matter how strong we are, how experienced, how well prepared, the mountain is stronger. It does not negotiate. It does not make exceptions. It does not care about our accomplishments or our confidence or our determination. It simply exists, vast and indifferent, operating according to laws that were in place long before humans evolved and will continue long after we are gone. We must adapt to it or fail. This is not cruelty. It is honesty. The mountain does not pretend to be anything other than what it is. It makes no promises. It offers no guarantees. The mountain shows us our true size, which is small, and our true strength, which is limited. We are fragile creatures, dependent on oxygen and warmth and food and water, easily injured, easily killed. On the mountain, these weaknesses become obvious. There is no hiding from them, no pretending they do not exist. The air is thin and breathing becomes difficult. The cold penetrates no matter how many layers you wear. Exhaustion sets in after hours of climbing. Your body reminds you constantly of its limitations, and the mountain amplifies every weakness. But the mountain also shows us what we are capable of when we respect our limitations and work within them. When we plan carefully, move slowly, pay attention to conditions, and know when to turn back. When we cooperate with others, sharing the load and the risk, recognizing that together we are stronger than apart. When we persist through difficulty not because we are fearless, but because we have calculated the risk and decided it is worth taking. The mountain rewards this kind of wisdom. It does not prevent accidents or eliminate danger, but it allows those who approach it with respect and intelligence to succeed more often than they fail.